Fish evolved to walk on land, lizards evolved to glide, I evolved to flip burgers at Wendy's. A few days ago I watched the movie Alien for the 23rd time this month, and in it they refer to the xenomorph species as a perfect organism that has evolved, or rather been engineered to survive almost anything. Drenched in molten lead, floating around in space, emotional rejection. They actually don't have sex at all. I guess that's one way to get around it. But could any real-life creature ever evolve to something this extreme? Where does evolution end, and could we humans ever reach that point? Let's start by looking at some extreme cases of actual evolution and make a list of traits that we would also like to develop and which we would rather not. A good place to start may be with the jellyfish so that we can all live forever, because who wouldn't want to listen to the Talk to a podcast for all eternity? Turritopsis dohrnii, also known as the Immortal Jellyfish, begins its life as a larvae which then settles on the sea floor and gives rise to an entire colony of polyps, each genetically identical clones. After a while, jellyfish, also identical clones, pop off of these polyps. The jellyfish, if damaged, sick, or old, can revert back to the polyp stage for a while and then pop off as a perfectly healed jellyfish, along with several clones of itself. This process could theoretically go on forever, giving you not only biological immortality, but also a lot of good friends along the way. There's a lot of animals that has developed other traits that are useful for similar reasons. For example, the naked mole rats doesn't really get cancer, and some animals have the ability to regenerate lost limbs. Now that we already have biological immortality, you might think that these traits would be a bit overkill, but they could actually come in handy. For example, just regenerating your lost finger might be a little more convenient than going back to a lump of matter for several weeks in order to regenerate. Especially if you have a date. There is also the chance of contracting a disease that kills you before you have the time to go through this process, so being immune to most diseases would still be pretty good. Apart from some animals being very resistant to cancer, some animals also have incredible immune systems. The vulture and the bat are just two out of several animals that can carry a whole lot of viruses in them without falling ill themselves. Sort of how like some alcoholics seem to somehow outlive everyone else. I guess they just grew resistant to the alcohol over time while the viruses inside them did not. Maybe we will all evolve into alcoholics. Another nice trait to have would be to be able to breathe both air and water like amphibians do, or at the very least be able to hold your breath for over an hour like for example crocodiles. Speaking of crocodiles, they have very tough skin that is almost bulletproof to some weaker lower caliber guns. Their scales evolved into tough plates called scutes that serve as great protection against bite or claw attacks. These scutes are mostly made of keratin, and the same strong material is already in human hair. With the increasing threat of nuclear annihilation, it might also be good to be immune to radiation. The cockroach is often quoted as being immune to this, but in reality it's not. It can, however, survive more than 10 times the amount of radiation compared to a human. The wasp Habrobracon, on the other hand, can tank over 180 times of what a human can. But if you really want to go all the way, look no further than the Tardigrade, who can survive 1,000 times the human limits due to a protective coating around their DNA made up of a protein called DSUP, and they can also repair any DNA that potentially gets damaged. The tardigrade is where we start talking xenomorph-like abilities. It can survive in the deep sea, mountaintops, hot, cold, and even in space. They dehydrate to only a few % of their normal water content and go into sort of a hibernating state in which nothing can disturb them. Except the government. The government always finds a way. A few more great traits for survival would be to be able to fly and also have retractable claws for defense. While having acid for blood might be a bit too sci-fi, we could at least be poisonous and colorful so that most animals would know to stay away. Size-wise, it would be nice to be fairly large. I'd even settle for average-sized. Anything above 10 centimeters. We don't want to be too large though, because that would require more food to sustain ourselves, but still large enough to not be considered prey by most animals. Humans have been evolving for about 5 million years now, or at least that's the answer I chose. You pick whatever number you like the most. So how much longer until we start growing wings and scales? The path human evolution is currently on doesn't exactly lead to where we want to be. We're probably going to get taller and our immune system will probably get better, but the viruses and bacteria will probably evolve at the same pace. We might also become more attractive, as this is in general a pretty important factor for a lot of people when choosing their partner. Especially in South Korea. Over there they actually have a name for it. Lookism. Over there, being attractive is super important, not just for finding partners, but for everything else too, like getting a job. If you go there, you will find that everybody looks like a supermodel. Every South Korean looks exactly the same. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a racist. It's because they have very strong social norms as for what haircuts looks good and how you're supposed to dress. A lot of people say this is a big factor as to why South Korea has a depression problem. Body positivity, you look good the way you are, out the fucking window. Not the words, the person. South Korea might take it a little far, but in general, humans evolving to look better is nothing to complain about because, well, some animals don't, and that's not great either. Our brains has gotten a lot bigger over long timescales, and that will probably continue, but there is some data that suggests that they may have shrunk a bit starting about 20,000 years ago. This is when TikTok was invented. Over a very long period of time, we would probably end up looking a lot like how some aliens are depicted in movies. Tall, skinny, pale from the lack of sunlight, no sexual organs. Hey, looks like I'm more evolved than the rest of you. But if robotics and AI become more integrated into our bodies, well then you can kiss biological evolution goodbye. This is how many people think we will actually evolve. Into a bunch of horny toasters. But is there any way to shift the biological evolution in the direction that leads to us getting all the traits we put on the list? Well, not without directly interfering with some gene editing. There simply isn't enough environmental factors to naturally drive evolution in that direction. We're already safe from predators and food gets delivered with the press of a button. The next step in evolution is more likely to be bigger arteries so they don't get clogged as easily. Our way of living will cause us to head down a very different direction than the one we need to be on to get all the cool stuff. If we want to get there, we will need to alter the DNA ourselves, and eventually we will probably be able to do that to an extent that is so precise that we can adopt almost any traits and looks we want. Although, in reality, we probably won't choose to look like poisonous bears with wings. I mean, some will, but not most. The norm will probably just be bigger penises and more boobs, but hey, I can live with that.